Welcome to Never Mind The Ballots election countdown. There's just 23 days to go now, and big Never Mind The Ballots news this morning. Sunak and Starmer are going to face Sun readers in a pre-election grilling. Never Mind The Ballots election showdown will see the two candidates be our next Prime Minister quizzed by me before a live audience of Sun readers on June 24th. Remember, subscribe at youtube.com/SunElection and never miss a Never Mind The Ballots episode. But back to the campaign, and my favourite question as ever, is Nigel Farage right? Is something happening out there? With me in the studio to discuss all this is the author and academic Matthew Goodwin, and joining us down the line from Wales is broadcaster Matthew Stadlen. Matt, one, is Nigel Farage right? Is something happening out there? And if so, what is it?
Well, I think something's definitely happening in the polls. If you look where we are at the moment, the Reform Party are up to nearly 14%. Nationally, when the election campaign started, they were just at 11%. So the direction of travel for Rishi Sunak is going in the wrong direction. The Tories, by the way, down on an average of 23%. So listen, we're either heading into the biggest error in the history of the polling industry, in which case the polling industry is just going to need to pack up and go home, or we're heading for a major Conservative wipeout and Farage's best performance on record.
The pollsters got it badly wrong in 2015. They've all had a sort of self-flagellating moment of sort of, doom about their industry since then. They got it pretty good, spot on in 2017 and 2019.
Yep.
So are you very much in the historic wipeout camp rather than pollsters looking silly on July the 5th?
Well, they've also got a lot of other things right too. Jeremy Corbyn becoming leader of the Labour Party and so on. I mean, the polling industry's record, I think, is actually pretty good. But don't forget, we've had those by-elections as well. We know these historic Labour swings, the big swings for the Labour Party are real. They're actually happening out there on the ground, not just in the polling tables that we all see online. So look, if I'm Rishi Sunak right now, I'm beginning to get nervous because he's in a weaker position than Liz Truss was. His leadership ratings are now weaker than Liz Truss's were. Nigel Farage's vote is holding up. The big squeeze on that reform vote is not happening.
Well, the opposite, it's going the other way.
The opposite. And if this carries on, then we may well actually start to get to that historic inflection point where Reform, only 2 points behind the Conservatives recently with one pollster, that's within the margin of error, Harry. I mean, if Reform start taking over the Conservatives, then all bets are off. I mean, mayhem is going to ensue.
Mayhem. Matt, too, Nigel Farage always tells us to get out of the M25 and see what's going on in the real world. You're in Wales. What's happening out there?
Well, I'm mostly sharing my time here with sheep and cows.
Very good. And how are they? Are they on the reform revolution?
I don't think they are, actually. I think they seem to be quite content. The only poll that matters, and we all know this, is on July the 4th. And I'm sure Keir Starmer and Labour are absolutely desperate that complacency doesn't set in because they will want to hoover up every single vote they possibly can. So no one's counting any chickens, any sheep or any cows here in Wales. As far as Nigel Farage is concerned, this is very, very bleak for Sunak, though, isn't it? Because we're led to believe, aren't we, that one of the reasons that Sunak, if not the main reason that he called this election far sooner than most of us thought he would call it, is to ambush Farage. There was this idea, wasn't there? And I think Farage actually said this to me in person in a green room recently, that he was gearing up for a 5-6 month campaign. And then, of course, when he was ambushed, he decided he wasn't going to stand, only to reverse that. The fact that he has now reversed that will have ambushed Sunak in return, and is very, very bad news for him, because although Reform, I still think, are unlikely to win many seats, they are a massive electoral risk to the Tory party. And it's nothing new that Farage has a corner of the electorate that is in his favour. I mean, don't forget, under his leadership in 2014, UKIP won the European Parliament elections here in the UK. And then again in 2019, when he was leader of the Brexit Party, they did the same. So there's no surprise that Farage is a danger to Sunak, but I think things are particularly bleak for the Tory party at the moment.
But it's not all great news for Starmer. Yes, he's way ahead. But if you crunch down into those numbers, why do you think it is, Matt, too, sorry, well, we've still got you on this point, is that, 20% of the 2019 Tory vote isn't going to Labour. It's going out the back. It's going to Reform. It's moving to the right. More Reform voters, according to JL Partners' poll last night, are coming from... Sorry, more 2019 voters are going to Reform than are going to Labour. Is there, why isn't Keir Starmer winning over, disenfranchised Tories in the same way that you'd expect him to do if he really was, sort of popular leader sweeping his way to number 10?
Yeah, because I don't think he is a massively popular leader. I don't think the polls suggest he is. I think that if Labour were to win this election by a landslide, it's not because people are desperate for a Labour government. I think it's because they are desperately fed up with the Conservatives. Reform voters are not stupid. They know that by giving their vote to Reform, they're making a Labour landslide, even a Labour victory, more likely. But they are so angry, and I'm sure Matt will come in on this as well, they are so angry with the Tories for their own reasons after the last 14 years that they're prepared to do so. Don't forget, in 1997, even someone as charismatic as Tony Blair, he won that massive landslide, not because vast numbers of people switched to Labour, but because he was able to reassure enough Tories who are fed up with the Conservatives after 18 years of Tory government, they didn't actually need to go out and vote Conservative. Tony Blair's Labour in 1997 won fewer votes than John Major's supposedly deeply unpopular Conservative Party in 1992.
Matt Goodwin, is there a sort of, we saw the European election results in France and Germany, particularly a shift to the right there, undoubtedly. Is Reform just sucking up a disenfranchised, irritated Tory vote that does, as Matt says, that doesn't, not necessarily enthusiastic about Keir Starmer, but a protest vote of sort? Well, or is this part of a wider trend we're seeing?
Well, most of Reform's support is coming from disillusioned 2019 Conservatives. There's no doubt about that. By the way, though, the biggest group of voters who are abandoning Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives are not going to Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. They're not going to Labour. They're saying, I'm not going to vote for anybody. I'm going to stay at home. Now, that tells me two things. One is, Rishi Sunak has a last-minute opportunity to try and win those voters back. I think that's unlikely. But it also says Nigel Farage, by the way, has an opportunity to add another few percentage points to Reform's vote if he reaches out into the apathetic masses. Now, if you look across Western democracies today, what we're seeing is clear evidence that ever since 2016, those big revolts for Brexit, for Trump, basically the elites haven't really figured out how to address the concerns and the grievances that millions of voters have about mass immigration, which has been a complete failure, by the way, the erosion of our national borders across Europe, the southern border in the US, the small boats crisis here in Britain, and institutions that many voters rightly feel are not actually giving them a voice in the national conversation. Now, I've been saying this for years, Harry. These populist parties are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, as they are doing. Marine Le Pen becoming president of France, no longer implausible, unless we get real about their concerns.
Matt Stadlen, your elites are out of touch, and this is just the result of years of ignoring them. What do you say to that?
Well, it's interesting. I just popped on one of Matt's Substacks. I think he has a lot of followers on Substack.
Thanks for promoting it, Matt.
I don't want to be rude, but it was quite a painful read because he just kept saying the Tory elites, the Tory elites. I lost count of how many times he's talked about the Tory elite. Listen, these elections on the continent, which we've all been paying rightly some attention to, they're not showing there's a massive swing to the far right. Unless I've got my facts wrong, and Harry,
what are you talking about? Matt, you're in Clark Cuckoo Land. The biggest gains of all went to parties on the radical right.
Before you come back, let me set out my case. The ID party, which we would describe as, you might not, but hard right or far right, they are in fifth place. They're way off the EPP. They're way off the SND. Any predicted or projected surge for the far right or the hard right is wrong. There is a caveat to that.
Who topped the polls in France, Matt? Or how about Austria or the Netherlands or Italy?
There are definitely caveats to that. What's happening in France is worrying for people of my political persuasion. The AfD, the alternative for Germany, they're really worrying as well because they are undoubtedly far right. But don't forget, and I come back to this earlier point, European elections can be seen as protest votes. Remember what I said earlier about 2014, 2009?
This is a comfort blanket for people on the left.
Farage won both of those elections. He's going to come nowhere near winning
But when you say protest vote, what it implies is that people are just kind of voting irrationally. They don't know what they're voting for. That's not true. If you look at all the evidence as to why people are voting for Marine Le Pen, for the AfD in Germany, for Nigel Farage in Britain, they have entirely rational, coherent concerns. The left refuses to accept this. They want lower immigration. They want slower demographic, cultural change. They want stronger borders. They don't want the woke stuff being jammed down their throats. They don't want to be told that a woman is a man and a man is a woman. They just want common sense policies. Now, the left can keep saying this is just protest. These people are irrational gammons and bigots and they're misinformed and they're disinformed. But the reality is they have entirely legitimate, understandable grievances about what's going on in the West today.
Matt Stadlen.
So let me come back to that, Harry, because it's really important, okay? It is undoubtedly true that the Tories have not delivered on what they said they would do. Remember David Cameron in 2010, promising net migration in the tens of thousands. I mean, that's just laughable. It happened again, I think, in 2015, again in 2017. And some people who really care about immigration, and I don't think it's the majority of people in this country, certainly not the majority of the people in this country think it's a bad thing. Yeah, they are entitled to feel that they have been let down. But if, as Matt says, these are huge issues that are really dominating people's lives, then please could Matt explain to me, who, by the way, like Farage, has absolutely no answers. In his Substack, all he does is point to potential problems. Could you please explain to me, Matt Goodwin, why it is that Reform are unlikely to make, 12 seats, 20 seats in this general election? If what you're saying is this great revolt, there's something's happening out there, as Farage says, this great cry to overturn the Westminster elite or the Tory elites, why are they going to do so badly in terms of seats in this election?
Well, the first answer is we have a first-past-the-post election system, which makes it notoriously difficult for new parties to win seats. I suspect where we will end up is Reform winning perhaps 1 or 2, maybe 3 seats. They'll probably poll somewhere around 5 million, 6 million votes. And by the way, they will probably finish second in around, here's a prediction, maybe 100 to 150 seats, including lots of Labour-held seats across the Red Wall, Northern England, like we saw in 2015 when Farage was leading the UK Independence Party. For a new party in the first-past-the-post system to even be talking about Reform just 2 points behind the dominant Conservative Party is in itself a remarkable state of affairs. So what we're likely to see, I think, is actually Reform emerge the day after the election. I suspect Farage will be elected in Clacton. Let's see. Maybe Richard Tice gets over the line in Boston and Skegness. I'm not so sure about that one. But I think we will all look at just how big that Reform vote is, how many second places Reform has, and be reminded of what Farage has said, which is this isn't about the next 20-odd days. This is about the next 1,800 days until the 28-29 general election.
So, Matt, if you're right, Matt...
Oh, I'm always right, Matt.
Well, that there is this great cry for freedom, this great anti-establishment sentiment that is surging, not just here in this country, but across Europe, that Farage is able to tap into this, that he's able to tap into the broken promises of the Tories in 2010, of these 14 years, as I'd see them, of Conservative failure. And by the way, on that, we're united. Neither of us want to see a Conservative government. If you are right about that, surely they should be polling more than 14%. 11, 12, 13, 14%. I mean, in 1 or 2 polls, we've seen them just 2%, admittedly, behind the Conservatives. But that's less than a fifth of the British population.
Well, I think
hang on. If people are so angry, let me finish. If people are so angry about immigration in this country, and in your article that I read, you said that the Tories had let in an assortment of illegal migrants, rapists, to be Islamist terrorists. That is straight out of the Trump handbook.
It's also true, Matt.
Your net migration, as you'd be quick to point out, is something like 600,000 or 700,000.
Yeah.
Do you think there are 600,000 or 700,000 would-be Islamist terrorists or
I think people who have come across on the small boats, Matt. I think people who have come across on the small boats, some of whom, by the way, have gone on to pour acid over mothers and children in their cars, some of whom have gone on to rape British schoolgirls down in Kent. Yes, actually, I think this is a serious issue that people care about.
There are criminals. Yeah, where you find human beings, Matt, whether they're white, black, blue or purple, Muslim, Christian, whatever they are, you will find criminals.
So we shouldn't be resolving this issue. We shouldn't be stopping the small boats.
Of course we should be
stopping. Right, there you go then. So let's do it and let's come up with a serious plan.
We agree on that. Yeah, well, of course we both agree on that.
Right, so there you are. What are you arguing about?
What I'm arguing about is the way that you characterise the people. Most of them are desperate to risk
Even
their
the
lives.
security services, Matt, have said the people who are coming across are a threat to the British people.
Right, okay, guys. You know what they're doing.
Time out.
Classic left.
We're talking over each other. Let's just keep it on the domestic election while we've got time to just focus on that for now. Nigel Farage, though, Matt Stadlen, you cannot deny. You said it. Why aren't they polling better? Reform were polling 9% last week, and they're now polling at 14-15%. There is an undeniable Farage factor. He does have something that is livening this election up, doesn't he?
Okay, so first of all, I'm not sure they were 8 or 9% last week. As Matt says, they've been sort of steady around 11% for a while before Farage, as Richard Tice would have been very keen to tell you and did tell us. Now they're doing a bit better. There's no, I don't live in some sort of bubble that Matt would like to characterise me as living in. I actually get around and about the country, up and down the country, and meet people. There's no doubt that Farage, of course, he has something of a popular touch. I'm not saying he's not an extraordinary politician. I find a lot of what he stands for absolutely repellent. But even on an individual level, man to man, and we used to be presenters on the same radio station, and we bump into each other from time to time in green rooms, we get on perfectly well. He's quite a sort of attractive personality when you meet him. That's part of his appeal. There is no doubt that he has been the dominant politician of the last 10, 20 years. Since Tony Blair, he has been an extraordinary force in this country. I just happen to disagree with Matt. I think he's a force broadly for the bad, not for the good.
Can I just briefly come in on this? This reminds me of 2014 when I briefed Ed Miliband and his team, just as they were getting ready for the 2015 general election, and they were celebrating the rise of Nigel Farage because they said this is going to divide the right and it's going to make a Labour government more likely. And many people on the left today, Harry, are doing the same. They're saying, well, this is great for us. Look at Reform eating away at the 2019 Conservative vote. But here's the thing. Over the longer term, over the next 3, 4, 5 years, if Farage keeps going as he is and Reform keep picking up support as they are, we'll see exactly what we saw between 2016 and 2019, which is Farage becoming a big problem in many of those Labour areas. And I suspect that will happen again.
Is this time, 8th, 9th, 10th time lucky? I can't count. Matt, I'll come back to you in 1 second, but I just want to ask Matt Goodwin this. Is it finally the time that Nigel Farage is going to break through? He's tried and tried and tried. He says everyone cheated or he stood in the wrong seats. Surely this is time.
So I've spent,
this time, if not now, when?
I spent a few days in Clacton looking at the campaign in detail. Look, I would be surprised if he doesn't win this time because the Conservative vote share in Clacton is going to collapse. Labour has not been competitive in that seat since 2005. Everybody down there is saying Labour are standing a paper candidate. Clacton has that long history of voting for UKIP, voting for Douglas Carswell. So look, if he can't win in Clacton this time around, when can he
But
win?
he's in Great Yarmouth today, he's in Barnsley, he's all over the place. The only place he doesn't seem to be is Clacton. Is that a mistake?
He was there. In recent days, I watched him go to local county fairs, car shows. I watched him go to pubs. I saw the reaction, by the way.
The big, huge crowds.
I saw the reaction to him, Harry.
There.
People down the street were going bananas when they saw him down there. But will they vote? And I do think I agree with Matt too on this, in that apathy at this election, that's Farage's biggest challenge. It isn't taking the Conservative vote, it's getting people in Clacton to vote. That is going to be his biggest challenge, because if turnout collapses, we may find that actually that seat becomes a little bit more difficult than we currently think.
Matt Stadlen's going to explode if I don't bring him back in. Matt, we're running out of time, but do you think he's going to do it this time?
Quick as I can. Let's say he wins first time in 8 attempts. Two possibilities, broadly speaking, seem to me available. One is that he takes over the Tory party from inside Parliament. And if he does that, there are these two possibilities. One is a disaster for the Conservatives and Labour win 10 years comfortably, because I don't think our country is anywhere near as extreme as Farage. I think it's broadly in the centre, a bit left or a bit right. I think you could say we're a sort of conservative country. The other possibility is if Starmer doesn't deliver, if Keir Starmer and Labour don't deliver in the first 2 or 3 years, then you found people broadly on the left who've been predicting that if that happens, maybe when it happens, then with Farage in Parliament, there is a real risk that this country does lurch towards the hard right. How that plays out, I think, is fascinating. And just before I finish, we haven't discussed, because we've been talking so much about immigration as the sort of font of all evils in this country. We haven't talked about the cost of living crisis. We haven't talked about NHS waiting lists. We haven't talked about stagnant wages. These are the things, mortgages, These are the things that matter to people, not what colour or what culture some of their neighbours are.
Matt views these all as being completely separate, when in fact we know mass immigration is driving the housing crisis. Mass immigration is weakening the economy.
We're going to have to call time there, Matt, to come back. And I think we can all agree, having had a civilised but robust conversation, we can all probably unblock each other on Twitter now, right? What do we reckon?
I'm very happy to be unblocked by you guys.
Matt Stadlen from Wales, Matt Goodwin here in the studio. Thank you. Now, just before we go, the moment you've all been waiting for, the section of the show where we laugh at Ed Davey. Ed, what has Ed Davey been doing today? He's been at Thorpe Park. There he is. A proper swing vote there. Another joke for me there. I'm running out of puns. No, living a time of his life. It's like he's won some sort of competition where he just gets to do his bucket list, isn't it? Bless Ed Davey there. Thank you to all my guests for joining me. Thank you, Matt 2, Matt 1. This was Never Mind The Ballots Election Countdown. Remember, subscribe on youtube.com/@sunelection and you won't miss a thing. See you tomorrow.